The news from Lake Wobegon is brought to you by Fiber One Honey Clusters cereal. With a touch of sweet honey and brown sugar, each serving has more than half of the daily value of fiber. Fiber One. Cardboard no, delicious yes.
Well, it's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, my hometown, out there on the edge of the prairie. It's been hot out there, and we're not used to it. It gets up into the 80s, and it's very humid, and people get nauseous walking back and forth into air conditioning and back out, and it confuses people. We're just not used to it. Very, very warm and humid out there. And then this big storm came in, as usually happens when things become humid and hot, and thunder and lightning, which we look on as God's attempt to reach out to the Unitarians, but all the damage I've done was to the righteous, of course, and Sister Arvon's flowers were beaten to shreds, and her tomatoes as well. But she's a person of faith, and so she is able to go on. There's a beautiful big full moon tonight in Lake Wobegon. It's called the Strawberry Moon because it's this time of year when the strawberries are ripe, and so people move around and find them. We find wild strawberries out along the fence rows because birds eat the strawberries and they sit on the fence and they poop out the seeds, and so that's where you find them. The blueberries as well you find at this time of year. They're all in parts of the woods and places where there were big brush fires just a couple of years ago, and you'll find them. They're very plentiful. It's the time of year when the strawberry moon, when people go for the sweetness of life, which doesn't necessarily jibe with Christian theology. We were brought up to believe that life is a struggle, and here we are, and there's strawberries and blueberries and raspberries everywhere you look, and it's confusing to us. And late at night, there are pagans out celebrating the summer solstice when the North Pole is pointed up towards the sun, and we have all of this daylight, and they wait for the sun to go down, and they're out there drinking and singing, and they're dancing in the dark, which we were brought up not to do, but there they are. They're young people mainly. It's easier for the young to be pagans than for people my age. A whole bunch of junior high boys who paddled over to the other side of the lake, and they stripped off their clothes and they went skinny dipping there in the cove where the lily pads are. Mr. Val Tollefson happened to be fishing for rock bass off the point, and he saw them, these naked boys, their pale bodies floating there on the water. And he yelled, "Hey, you! Hey! What are you doing there? You go get your clothes on, or I'm going to go get you out of that water." And I'm not kidding. It was what his father always yelled at him when he went skinny dipping. And so he felt obliged to yell it at those boys. And of course they got out right away, and they got back in their boat, and they paddled back, chastened slightly, one would hope. Few pagans in Lake Wobegon, not so very many. People going out and collecting blueberries and strawberries. And you want to be careful out there because bears are attracted to those very same berries. And you might meet a bear in the dark. And of course they're shy, black bears, but when they have a sugar overload, and they can be easily confused, and they may go to run away from you and run towards you, and suddenly you have a dancing partner there. And if you have smeared berries on your face, as so many people do, pagans especially, white people smearing blue and red on their chests, then you have yourself a lover that you were not counting on. This can easily happen. Wood ticks are plentiful this time of year too, and of course every evening when people come into the house, they have to do a tick check. Some people do this solo, other people do this with a partner, and of course, ticks like to hide away in the most private places, and this is a little ceremony that people go through. Some of you children who were born in March and April may owe your very existence to a tick check. Don't need to go into that in great detail. There was a bear who came into town on Tuesday, a bear who was drunk on blackberries and strawberries and just staggering around, and came to the parsonage and was in the backyard. And Pastor Liz was there in the parsonage, and she looked out and saw him, and she was worried that somebody would come over and shoot him or something. And so she took a rope, got it down on a coil off the wall of the mudroom, and she went out and she tossed one end of that rope to the bear, and he started to fool with it, and he got himself a little bit tangled up in it. And then she ran around him and wrapped that rope right around. He'd never seen a human being do this before, and so he sat down, and by the time he had recovered his senses, she had him pretty well bound up so that he couldn't go any place, which amused her and reminded her of a joke. And because there wasn't anybody else around, she told the bear the joke. A minister was out in the woods, and he was walking along, and he was chased by a bear, and the bear caught him and got him down on the ground. And the minister said, "Lord, save your servant's life and make this bear a Christian." And the bear knelt down and he said, "Lord, I do thank you for that which I am about to receive." Pastor Liz was there in the parsonage. Complicated story. She came to town about 2 weeks ago. This tall, handsome woman from New Jersey, because the Lutheran Church has been looking for a replacement for Pastor Inkvist, who left a few months ago. And meanwhile, there's been this interim pastor, Pastor Barbara Ham, who's been in the position. But Pastor Liz had a call from the Holy Spirit to come and serve Lake Wobegon. Not that that necessarily qualifies you in the church, but nonetheless, she felt certain of it, and the search committee was wondering about her too, and she showed up in town right about the time that Barbara Ham got a call to come out to South Dakota because her father, an elderly man, had fallen out of an apple tree and hit his head, and now he was confused and thinking that it was 1870 and that he was an Ojibwe warrior and that his wife was General George Armstrong Custer. So Barbara Ham had to go out to South Dakota, and Pastor Liz moved into the parsonage as a replacement, a temporary replacement for an interim pastor while the search committee searched for somebody. Yes, I know it's complicated, but interesting nonetheless to the Lutherans of Lake Wobegon. She sort of won their heart. She went to be a waitress and a cook in the sidetrack tap when Wally pulled down the shades and opened up the windows and whitewashed the walls and turned this sidetrack tap, this old dive, into a lunch place and put a lunch menu out. And she had a crowd in there for the soccer game, the World Cup soccer game, the U.S. against Algeria. And nobody cares about soccer in that bar, but they all came just because they're curious about Pastor Liz sitting down there playing the piano and cooking and waiting on tables. She's a miracle. She's a miracle in our town. As Clint says, she's a happy Lutheran. How many did you ever see in your life? She's an exuberant person, and so they all love her. And people cheered and cheered when the USA got a score there. Tight game, and then they suddenly woke up with 5 minutes to go, and a whole series of exciting plays, and they scored a goal against Algeria, and she jumped up on the table, and she did a kind of a salsa version of the national anthem, and then she danced a tango with Mr. Berge as they sang America the Beautiful. He was drunk at the time, so he made an interesting partner. They're very, very curious about Pastor Liz in Lake Wobegon. The Synod, of course, has done an investigation of her to find out who she is, and they've uncovered some disquieting rumors. There was a rumor that she that she had participated in a communion service with Unitarians in which the wafers had guacamole on them. And there was a rumor that she had gone to a Lutheran nudist camp in North Carolina. Well, that seemed unlikely that there would even exist such a thing. She firmly denied the accusation of the guacamole communion wafers. But there was another story about her that in seminary she had participated in a farting contest. And after an evening of drinking beer, and that she had won the contest by farting eine Festeburg ist unser Gott, the first 8 bars of it, which she did not deny, but said there were extenuating circumstances. But she's also performed miracles for people, and so they're watching her very carefully. There was the miracle of that bear, which she subdued with no loss of life, and she was walking down the street past the Magandans' house, and their big black lab came out there barking and growling, made a dash for her, and she just stood, and she held out her hand, and she spoke to it, and before long she had that dog lying on the ground, and his head was lying at her feet. And then there was the miracle of Mr. Berge, who, after the USA scored the goal against Algeria, Pastor Liz looked out the window and saw his brother Bob walking down the street. These two brothers have been estranged for 28 years. They haven't spoken to each other. People have tried to bring them together, and each of them have said, well, sure. I mean, whenever he's ready to apologize to me for the way he treated our mother, sure, I'll speak. Well, so nobody could. She just took Mr. Berge by the hand. Now, as I say, he was drunk at the time, so he was malleable and amenable. She took him by the hand, and she said, I think it's time you grow up. And she took him outside, and she pushed him towards his brother, and he walked over, and he just said, good morning. That was the first words he'd said to his brother in 28 years. And these two old men burst into tears, and they put their arms around each other. She brought these men together, and she had this outdoor service this last Sunday. People had never seen this before. I guess other people have done it, but there was a first for Lake Wobegon Lutheran Church. She held it out in the woods, out in a clearing, and there were 85 people who came. They stood on either side of the creek where it flows down into the marsh. It was a beautiful Sunday morning. The service lasted for about 45 minutes. No organ, no piano, no pomp, just the Christians there in the woods, as if they'd been hunted, as if they were in refuge. And the sermon was on the lady, the woman who came to Jesus and who washed his feet with her tears. It was a sermon about kindness, pure kindness and affection. It was very moving to people. And then she pulled out her guitar and she sang a little hymn that they had sung when they were children and never since. God be with you till we meet again. In his counsel's guide uphold you. In his flock securely fold you. God be with you till we meet again. God be with you till we meet again. Underneath his wings hide you. Daily manna still provide you. God be with you till we meet again. And she put her arm around people as they all sang the chorus with tears in their eyes. These people don't cry easily, you see. These are Lutherans, after all. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet at Jesus' feet. Till we meet, till we meet. God be with you till we That's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above that.